I think fruit cobblers are some of the most underrated desserts. They're so good. It's such a comfort food. When I eat fruit cobbler, especially peach or blackberry, I'm reminded of being a little girl at Granny's supper table again. Those were the kind of desserts that she might make during the week and saving the weekend, like Sunday dinners and things, for those fancier dishes like apple stack cake or applesauce cake or coconut cake or those type things. But during the week, if we got a dessert, it was usually some type of cobbler. Probably my favorite cobbler is peach. I really like blackberry, but I'm really stingy with my blackberries. I usually prefer to save those for jelly making. So peach is probably my favorite cobbler. And the cobbler recipe that I use is one that is so common, I'm sure that you've already heard about it and that you already know about it. So you take your fruit, and then you need a cup of self-rising flour, a cup of milk, and a cup of sugar, and a stick of butter. And that's it. That's how simple it is. That was another reason that it kind of lends itself to those weeknight suppers instead of the weekend where maybe you have more time to devote to a more elaborate dessert. In my area of Appalachians, peaches don't readily grow very easily. It's not that they don't love the summer, they do, but it's those sneaky late season, late spring frosts that a lot of times will get your peach blooms. When they're bloomed out, they'll bite your peaches and then you won't have any, those late sneaky frosts. The further south you go, though, the less chance there is of that happening. Here where we live in Cherokee County, of course, now you can go to a local produce stand and get peaches. I could get them today if I wanted to. You know, there's more variety of things these days. In the old days, like when Granny was a little girl, she says that every year someone would come by the house. I guess maybe over the years Granny Gazzy bought them. I don't know if they stopped at every house. I need to ask Granny that, or if they kind of just knew who was on their route. But every year a man would come by selling peaches, and Granny Gazzy would buy enough peaches for them to eat, but also enough peaches for her to can for future use. And all the Sunday dinners that I ever remember eating at Gazzy's house, I remember there'd always be a bowl of peaches. They really loved peaches, and they loved them. Pap loved them like that. He loved to eat them just with a plain yellow cake, with sweet bread. He really enjoyed them with sweet bread. I know a lot of people like them with like cocoa bread or chocolate cake with peaches. That's really good. Granny's stories of the man coming by Granny Gazzy's house when she was a little girl to sell peaches is similar, or is common in other parts of Appalachia. In my More Than Moonshine Appalachian Recipes and Recollections by Sydney Saylor Farr, she has this to say about peach trees, and she was from the Berea, Kentucky area. Peach trees did not bear well in our part of the country. Every summer, a man in the neighborhood drove a truck to South Carolina or Georgia and brought back a load of peaches to sell. Mother usually bought 4 bushels. They were peeled, cooked, put in sterilized jars, sealed, and stored on shelves in the can house to wait for cold days of winter. We made peach butter, peach preserves, and various kinds of desserts. So when I was growing up, there wasn't anybody necessarily coming by selling peaches, but Granny would buy them at one of the local produce places, and she would buy a bushel or more from someone that was selling them in that manner, and then she would can her peaches is what she did. And I think those made the best cobblers. I don't know if it was actually that it was because Granny canned them, those fresh peaches, or if it was just that Granny made the cobbler. That was probably it, but they were so good. But today, typically, I would use frozen peaches. Sometimes I don't really buy bushels and can them or anything, but I typically do buy peaches at least once during the summer months, and I'll make peach jam and peach jelly. The peach jelly is a funny story. I'll tell you that later if I show you how to make those. And then if I have any extra or some that are just on the counter, maybe we bought just to eat and they're going bad, then I'll pop them in the freezer just for future use, thinking of cobblers. But out of all the fruit cobblers, like I said, blackberry and peach, but peach probably is my favorite. Another reason I really like peach cobbler is, who doesn't like a good peach, you know? But I love to tease Corey and Katie. When I had them, I kind of had the pregnancy, a horror pregnancy from day one, but they were kind of miracle babies too. I didn't really expect that I could have kids, and then I had twins, so that was really an amazing blessing from God. But it was a really difficult pregnancy, and thankfully I had here where I live, there's no large hospital that really could support the kind of pregnancy I had, but I had a great doctor in Gainesville, Georgia, and so it's 2 hours. I'd make that trek over the mountain, over Blood Mountain, once a week, pretty much the entire pregnancy. But it turned out great, of course, because they were born healthy, but I tease them a lot that they're my Georgia peaches. So now I'm going to show you how to put together this beach cobbler. It couldn't be more simpler, and you probably already know about it. But it starts off with, I have a stick of butter, and I've got it in this glass dish that I like, baking dish I like to use for my cobblers. It's a little smaller than my 13 by 9 metal pan that I use for other things. And the interesting thing about the butter is this recipe is so simple and basic, but there's a few little variations that, depending on who's making it, that's how they do it. And those little variations pretty much show you that it's almost foolproof, that any way you do it, it's going to work out okay. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the oven, turn it on to 350, and let this butter be melting. While we wait for the butter to melt in the dish, I'm going to put my frozen peaches, and this is just a bag of frozen peaches. Let's see how many it is. It's about almost 2 cups of peaches. Yeah, about 2 cups, maybe a little bit more, but about at least 2 cups of peaches. And I'm going to put them in a pan, and I'm going to put a half a cup of water and a half a cup of sugar, and then I'm going to let them cook on the stove for about 10 minutes. You're really just letting the peaches cook long enough for the sugar to really dissolve and kind of make a sugar syrup. And there are people that use like cans of peaches. That works well for this also, so you could use that totally. So some of the variations I was talking about, like I melt my butter in the pan, and just because it's so much easier. But to Granny, she don't think that's as easy. She wants to hurry up and get it done. So she puts all her ingredients together, and then she cuts up pieces of butter and puts it on top of the batter, on top of the peaches. That's how she does hers. Also, so there's a difference. It doesn't really make any difference. They're both good, and you can't really tell the difference that you've done that. Some people say you put the peaches first in the bottom of the dish, and then you pour the batter on top of them. I believe that's how Granny does hers. I think so. And I think that's usually how I do mine. Other recipes, the same simple recipe, using a cup and a cup and a cup, and a stick of butter, will say to put the batter in and then gently spoon the peaches on top of the cobbler, and then pour your juice and bake it that way. So there's just all these variations that tell me really ever how you do it, it's going to turn out really good. And it works well, the same basic recipe, using a cup of self-rising flour, a cup of sugar, and a cup of milk, and a stick of butter. Works really good with strawberries. That's really delicious. With blackberries, with about any fruit that you can think of. Even apples would probably be good. I don't think I've made an apple cobbler. I go for apple pies mostly, but I think any fruit that you used would be good in this recipe. Okay, the butter's melted in the pan, and then my peaches have cooked enough to dissolve all the sugar. I'm going to put them in here. Now, like I said, some people do the batter first, then put the peaches on top. This is just the way that Granny done hers, so that's the way that I do mine. Just gently pour them in there. One thing about this recipe is, though, that everybody agrees on, is that once you put the ingredients in there, dump them in there, so I think some people even call it a dump cake, then you don't want to stir it up. You don't want to stir any of it up. So now I'm going to take my 1 cup of white lily white lily self-rising flour. You could use all-purpose, but then you'd have to add you some leavening in there. But I'm using self-rising, 1 cup self-rising flour, 1 cup sugar, and 1 cup of whole milk. And then you just stir it around till it smooths out and makes it's a thin batter. It doesn't get really thick. Okay, you can see how it's really a thin batter. We've got that. Then we're just going to gently pour it over the peaches and butter mixture. Then we're going to bake it. You're going to bake your cobbler at 350 for about 30 minutes. You can keep an eye on it in your oven the first time and make sure how long it takes, but it'll turn a golden brown on top. You'll be wonderful. The bread's my favorite part. Peaches give it a good flavor, but the bread's my favorite part. So I just got the cobbler out of the oven. It is really good, just like it is, just like that. It's so good. But if you want to make it just over the top, you need to put a scoop of vanilla ice cream on it, or whatever ice cream you like, but for me it's vanilla. In our area where we live, we have a brand of ice cream called Mayfield. That's my favorite ice cream. I'm sure there's some out there that's probably maybe better for you or made out of better ingredients, but Mayfield is the ice cream that I grew up on, and it's just the kind that I like the best. So now I'm going to show you how wonderful this is. When I was talking about the differences in the way to... the main difference is if you put the peaches on the bottom like I did, the top is kind of uniform and you can't really tell, you can't see the peaches, in other words. If you put the peaches on the top, then you'll see pieces of peaches on top. So it's just personal preference, but it tastes the exact same either way you do it. It tastes the same. Well, here's just a scoop of vanilla ice cream. It's going to slide off because it's so hot from coming out of the oven. So I shouldn't be eating this right now because I'm just about to eat supper, but who could resist? Corey's standing here with me.
I'm gonna eat it.
I think Corey's gonna be my taste tester.
Oh, is this for me?
This is for you. Good. So good.
You just can't believe how good that is.
So Cobbler's just underrated, don't you think? Yeah.
Totally, and then you add ice cream to it.
Yeah,
and it's literally a whole different thing.
Yeah. Does it remind you of Granny?
It does. It makes me think of Granny. She made that a lot, especially the peach.
Yeah, makes me think of Granny and Pat too. Anyway, I'm sure you probably already had this recipe and I didn't even need to show you how to make it, but I hope you enjoyed this video. And tell us, what's your favorite way to make peach cobbler? Are you a cobbler fan like we are, or would you prefer some other type of dessert? But mostly, what do we hope?
We hope you'll drop back by often to help us celebrate Appalachia. That was my shining moment! I had to say